The purpose of this video is to demonstrate how to create and deploy an assessment, a test, in Blackboard for students to complete online. Tests or assessments are deployed in content areas. So in this demonstration course, I'm going to first go into an content area that I have called assignments. In the assignments area, I have a link for assessments, and I'm going to hover over that and choose to create a test. In the add test area, I have the option to create a new test or add an existing test. I have a sample one here. This is a test that has been created but not deployed. Once a test has been deployed to students, it will no longer appear in this list. I'm going to go ahead and create my new test. I'm going to give it a generic name. I'm going to call this the Chapter 3 test. The description that I choose to include and the instructions that I would choose to include in these two boxes will eventually be displayed to students when they take the Chapter 3 test. Now that I have a set of instructions here for this test, I'm going to go ahead and hit my Submit button. At this point, I've created a test and I have no questions. There are several ways that I can get questions for my test. If I hover over the Create Questions option, I can now create individual questions to add into this test. For example, I could choose a true and false style question. I would then create a question text and question title. My pro tip is to make the question title the same as your question text. I'm going to go ahead and add those in now. Rather than individually typing the questions, I'm going to access the questions that I already have typed up in a document, and I'm simply going to copy and paste those questions into my test. We see here that this is a true and false style, and true is the correct answer. I've pasted the text into my question text area. I'm going to paste that same information in as my question title. I'm going to set my options, vertical or horizontal orientation for this true or false question. The correct answer is true. I can create feedback to students that select the correct answer or give feedback to students that select an incorrect response to this question that is displayed to these students when the test is submitted. Establish categories and instructor notes if I should so choose. I'm going to go ahead and click Submit, and now I have one question in my Chapter 3 test. Notice it defaulted to 10 points. If I wish to change the point value, I simply click on the point value and change that to the value that I would like. I can then hit my Submit button and it will save that at that value. I can then create more questions by selecting from the list, or if I wish, I can also use these plus signs to add questions above and below individual questions that are in my test. Should I have a question I don't wish to utilize in the test, I can hit the check mark right here, and then I can choose to delete the value. A pro tip here, after adding a series of questions, if I want all of those questions to have a specific point value, what I can do is put a check mark on every one of those questions and then type in the point value that I would like in this box and click Update, and Blackboard will update all of those questions to that point value at once. I can also add questions to my test from a pool of questions that has already been created and uploaded into Blackboard. Under the Reuse Questions menu here, I would go down to the Find Questions option. On the left-hand side, I would see the various pools of questions that are available. In this case, I have a pool of Chapter 3 questions. I'm going to place a check mark there in front of that. That's going to bring up the questions that are here, and I can see that I have 2 questions in my pool. As I look through the pool, I can place a check mark in front of the questions that I would like to add to my test. If I would like to add all of the questions that are in the pool at once, I can hit the check mark at the very top and it will check off all of the questions available at once. I then hit my submit button in the lower right hand corner. The question pool window goes away and I now have these new questions added in. In this demonstration video, this is the same question here that I created as a demonstration. It already existed in my pool. In this case, if I did not want that question to be in there twice, which I don't, I simply place a check mark in front of the one that I would like to get rid of, and I hit my delete button to delete that question. Now I have a question I created and a question from my pool. I could continue to create more questions, or I could go to other pools and continue to add questions to my test. Now that I have questions in my test, I simply go to the lower right hand corner and click my OK button. At this point, I have a Chapter 17 test and a Chapter 3 test available. Because I created the new test and the test that I would like to deploy is my Chapter 3 test, I'm going to click once on Chapter 3 test and I'm going to go ahead and click my submit button. Now I'm going to be given a screen with the test options for my students when they take the test, the settings that I have. If I should choose, I can type a content link description. However, that is not necessary. I have test instructions here that are visible. The check mark here asks if I would like students to see these instructions before they take a test. I can go ahead and turn that on. If I should so choose, I can open the test in a new window. Think of a new window as a new tab in a student's browser. If I leave it at no, it will open on the screen they're on. Test availability. In order for a student to take the test, I need to choose yes, make this test available to students. I can allow students to take this test multiple times. If I place a check mark here in front of multiple attempts, I can give them unlimited attempts, or I can give them a specific number of attempts. If I only want students to take a test once, do not check multiple attempts. If I check off multiple attempts, I need to choose which score to use. Last attempt, first attempt, average of all attempts are some of the options. I can establish forced completion, which requires a student to complete the test all at once in one sitting. They cannot pause the test or close their browser and come back at a later time. I can set a timer for the students. In this case, if I check off the timer, I can set the number of minutes that this test is allowed to be taken. I can choose auto submit so that if it's on after 60 minutes, the test is automatically submitted. If it is off, the test at that point, the time expires. The student can continue to answer questions, but as an instructor, I would see only the questions, or I would see at which point the questions they answered through that 60-minute window, and I could also then see which questions they answered after the 60-minute window was up. I can choose to display the test over a specific range of times and dates. I can establish a password students would need to type in order to take the test. If I had students that had accommodations, I could add those accommodations in here for individual students, such as extended time or multiple attempts for students. I can establish a due date when this test is due. I can allow or not allow students to take a test after a due date. Most likely, you would like to include the test in your grade center score calculations. I can control what students see when they're done taking the test. At this point, after submission, the students will see their score per question. I can also allow them to see their answers, what's the correct answer, what they submitted, and if I choose to show feedback I may have given them. If I would like, I can also set this to give them a one-time view. I can show them their test on a specific later date, after the due date, or after the other attempts have been taken. The presentation of the test can be all the questions at once. I can otherwise have my tests taken one at a time, and I can also prohibit students from going back to an earlier question in the sequence. Finally, I can randomize the questions that pop up. Question 1 for one student might be question number 13 for a different student. At that point, after I've set my choices here for the test options, I'm going to go ahead and click Submit. And what we see here is that we have a Chapter 3 test link for our students. If I need to, I can hit the drop arrow next to Chapter 3 and I can edit the test, which is where I could go and add or remove questions. The moment a student takes the test, I can no longer edit the test questions, but I could possibly edit the test options. If students have not taken the test yet, test options would again allow me to edit those options that I just demonstrated for you. Once a student comes in, they will click on the test link here. It will bring up the instructions here as we so chose. It will notify them of any time limit and other settings. The student will simply click the Begin button here, and they will visually see the test. They may then click their selection, their choice. Once they make their choices inside of here, I'm going to purposely choose an correct answer and an incorrect answer. Blackboard does, as you move around, automatically save your answers, but students will then need to go down and click the Save and Submit button. The test will be submitted. The screen will show them what they have done and how long it took them to complete. The lower right hand corner, they click OK, and based on your settings, they can see what their score was. In this case, I got 1 point on question 1. I have 0 points on question 2. Based on my settings, I was not showing my students what the correct answer was at this time. So in this case, they know they did not get the points for it, but they did not see what the correct answer was. Students will then click OK, and the test has been completed. As an instructor, as students complete the test, I will go into the Grade Center and then the Full Grade Center, and I will see in my Grade Center a column for that test, in this case the Chapter 3 test. I don't have any students in this demonstration course, but what I would see would be a point value here if the test was automatically graded and scored for each one of my students in a column here. If I had any questions that I as the instructor needed to grade, such as a short answer or essay question, I would see a yellow exclamation point in the box here. I would then click on that yellow exclamation point and I would have a setting choice that says grade attempt. I would then click grade attempt and be brought to that student's test where I would read their short answer essay questions, establish the number of points they earn, and submit that. After all of that grading, the yellow exclamation point would become the official score here in the gradebook. I hope this helps you to better understand how to create and deploy a test in Blackboard.